Dipti is here now with the newspapers. She is starting off with that appearance by the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. A very rousing speech, in fact, it was, wasn't it, Dipti, to the British Parliament yesterday?
That's right. He channeled Winston Churchill in that speech to the House of Commons. He appealed for Britain's help in helping push back the Russian invasion. And it's really dominating the British dailies today. They're very charmed by his presentation yesterday. "We will fight to the end," the Daily Mail quotes Zelensky's words on its cover today. Zelensky likening Ukraine's fight to June 1940, when British forces were forced to retreat from France in the face of a Nazi Germany onslaught. The paper calls him a Commons hero on its front page, in contrast to the Commons zero, John Bercow, the former Speaker of the House of Commons, who's been suspended by the Labour Party over bullying and harassment allegations. Here, hero, that's how the British local paper Metro puts it on its front page. Zelensky was the first foreign leader to address the House of Commons via video link, the paper says.
In fact, more than a staggering 2 million Ukrainians have now fled Ukraine and are seeking refuge in Europe. It's something that's also making headlines today.
Well, just after 2 weeks of war, 2 million Ukrainians have fled their country. Solidarity, emergency, that's how the French paper L'Humanité puts it on its front page today. The Belgian paper Le Soir writes that welcoming a refugee population is a sensitive time for everyone and can quickly turn to animosity if it's not done properly, the paper warns. But why, it asks, are Ukrainians given automatic asylum status while Eritreans, Syrians and Afghans were subjected to a long and often painful asylum approval process?
And that's the focus you found, isn't it, Dipti, of a Saudi paper. It actually criticises the EU's open door policy for Ukrainian refugees. Stark contrast from the harrowing plight of Syrians, of course.
That's right. Arab News, the Saudi newspaper, is really disdainful of the way Europe has sort of welcomed Ukrainian refugees, especially in Poland, which, like Hungary and the Czech Republic, refused point blank to take in Syrian refugees fleeing war and persecution. The paper reminds us that Poland also created a $380 million wall with neighboring Belarus to block out non-EU refugees seeking asylum in the EU. The paper is particularly furious over a new Danish proposal that would allow Ukrainian refugees to be exempt from what they call the jewelry law, which is a law that allows European authorities to seize the assets of Syrian and Iranian refugees as payment to stay in the country, something that potentially would not apply to Ukrainians.
Now, the war in Ukraine, of course, playing out in all different aspects, from the humanitarian side, also, though, don't forget the economic side.
Well, it's a declaration of, quote, the other war. That's how Libération puts it on its front page. They're looking at the U.S.'s embargo on Russian energies yesterday, which it says will probably create an economic, or is creating an economic shock not seen in half a century. That economic shock is the focus of an Italian front page today, Libero, a shock that has inspired this front page, that persisted during 2 years of a pandemic and exacerbated now by this war in Ukraine. Sky-high petrol prices, rising energy bills, tourism is down, industries are struggling. Wake up, the paper says to the Italian government on its front page. But, of course, all that is nothing compared to the suffering of Ukrainians in Ukraine. This cartoonist, Mike Lukovich, reminds us rather acerbically in this cartoon here.
Finally, from Dipti today, she's been looking at Ukrainian sportsmen and women who've taken up arms to defend their country from Russia's invasion.
Well, from ballerinas to boxers, Stuart, Ukraine sports stars have headed to the front lines, Politico tells us, to defend their cities. Most notably, Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko, a world heavyweight boxing champion. But there are also winter athletes who've signed up. In fact, a 19-year-old winter athlete was reportedly killed in the first weeks of combat. Ballerinas too. Lesia Vorotnik, the principal dancer at Kyiv's National Opera, has reportedly swapped her shoes for combat boots. As you see in this post on Twitter, there she is holding up a Kalashnikov. And a Ukrainian tennis player, Sergei Stakhovsky, who once beat Roger Federer in Wimbledon, has left his family in Hungary and signed up to the territorial army. In this post here, he says he hopes that he won't have to use a gun, but if he needs to, he will use it.
Yeah, it's very dramatic, isn't it, to see those pictures side by side.
Very dramatic indeed, yeah.
Dipti Laurent there with the press review here on France 24.